Namaste. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything, volume 13, as we have it now. So as we go through this, you'll see how it works if you're new to the channel. But basically, if you have a question you want me to answer or address or comment, something you want to share, feel free to put it underneath this video. And then at the end of February, I'll spend some time and go through all of these questions that have come up here. And each month we do the similar, basically. Sometimes there's a little change in the date depending on if we're away on retreat, something like that. But it's usually around this time that I'll record it, or the 1st or 2nd of the month. So we'll get started because there's a lot of comments on this one today. The first one is from FishyDnB, and it says, Happy New Year. Well, Happy New Year to you. Gosh, you put that like 4 weeks ago. I have to ask you, Fishy, every time I see the DNB, does that stand for dandelion and burdock? Because I'll be kind of disappointed if it doesn't. So please let me know. We used to have that when we were growing up quite a lot, and I still, every now and again, is one of my dad's favorites before he passed. So Lünefritz says, hope I'm pronouncing that right. There is such a crazy amount of energy in this system, and it feels as if I cannot fully contain it until now. Although I know that the infinite space contains everything, it feels as if my capacity is not yet enough for this experience. Does that make sense? The me has to go for it to be contained, right? There seems to be a strong identification with this life force, and it goes back and forth between realizing myself as not it or free from it, and then again being pulled back into it, thinking about it, struggling with it, and so on. Is there anything more to do than just to realize myself as the perceiver of it as much as possible? Thank you so much, Helen. Well, yeah, I think for me, it was very much the same. At some points, I thought my head was going to blow off on my body and things like that, because it was, the life force was just so really, really strong. And you're, of course, correct. It's the identification. It's the someone getting in the way of that. It's the me, the separate sense of me that is in resistance to it. The ideas you have about the life force itself will be more challenging than the life force itself. Left alone, our body knows what to do to be with this energy. And I can guarantee, well, firstly, your head isn't going to explode, which is good news, obviously. Secondly, that it's not going to always feel like this. So every time I had a shift, there was more energy liberated from the thoughts I'd been believing. And that felt really intense and powerful for a while. Then my body got used to that. And then there'd be another shift, and it just keeps on going like this. Now it's kind of happening continuously, but tiny incremental amounts. There's not this big, and then your body suddenly got to learn what to do with all this extra life force energy. We've been running on empty, just enough life force to keep the body going a little bit more. And suddenly when we start to really question this main assumption that we're a separate being, that's when we begin to find that this excessive energy can come. And your body doesn't always know what to do with it straight away. But in a free-flowing energetic system, it should flow unimpeded. And it's not the energy itself that you're having a challenge with. It's where it hits some resistance. So you've got this fast-flowing river of life force energy going down through the chakra system and out into and as your life. Now, when it's fast-flowing energy hits some resistant thought, I can't handle this, I'm not good enough, I'm not ready for this, or some thought that's not really aligned with who you actually are, but is very habitual for who you thought you were, then it's like this fast-flowing river of energy hitting this boulder and smashing up against it, and that's what you're feeling. So you could just gently ask, I mean, obviously self-inquiring, looking for the me, but more specifically, where are you resisting this flow? So you can tell if there's somewhere in the body where there's tension. You can relate that to the particular chakra, or if you're not into the chakras, you can just feel in the body where there feels resistance. You can ask, what is that resistance? What thoughts? But it'll be thoughts that you tend to think a lot without realizing. And the life force is you, as you've said here. So as you begin to lose your separation from it, there's no one to be affected by it. Every time there's been this huge jump in life force energy through my body, I've had this same challenge. I just can't cope with all this. There's too much of it. And then you get used to the excess. We're used to having so little that when this abundance of energy is liberated from the beliefs that have been really tying up, the anti-reality. They're like, I'm a separate being and I'm not good enough. Those beliefs take so much energy from the system. So if you just relax as well, if you can, best you can, and listen to your body, sometimes some deep breathing where your belly moves. Tend to only breathe our chest, not our diaphragm as well. See what your body wants to do. Sometimes a little bit of yoga was good. Sometimes for me, some deep breathing. Sometimes I just went and did little exercise. Sometimes just went for a brisk walk to burn a little off, get it flowing better. Whatever you feel intuitively to do, or maybe just to go into a deep meditation and then let that flow. It's not the energy itself, it's where it's hitting resistance. All energy is vibration, and resistance is just a vibration. It's going really slow against this really fast. It wants to move, and then it hits this one that's just going like this, and it's getting jammed up behind this lower frequency. The vibration inside a vibration is just all vibration. So just an open question like, where am I? Where am I resisting? What are my resistant thoughts? And you might notice some emotion. You can ask the emotion what the belief is behind it. For me, there's a lot of fear came up. I'm not going to be able to cope, something like that. So have a go with that and see how it works out. Okay. N8 says, hi, Helen. This is an answer to my question on desiring to have children. You told me to look at who wants it. I tried. I came to the conclusion it's me, a family representative who wants the family, or my family, to have a happy ending, a continuation of family. I don't know if this is a true desire to follow. So if I were you, you were talking about wanting children, not being successful in that as yet, as I remember. Sorry if I'm wrong there, but and we were looking at the I that wants it, because the I that wants it is in resistance to it, can't quite allow it. So this me, this family representative, have a deeper look at that. What is it made out of? Can you actually find a me when you search your being for it? Can you find someone? Are you really a separate being? And that's not to say this desire isn't valid or it's going to disappear. We just want to be really clear who it is that wants it. The self is always expanding and manifestation in physicality, in terms of our family growing, in terms of expansion to the inner states of more peace, more love, more joy. So this is part of the natural expansion of life in the manifestation, and that's totally normal. But you'll have a much easier time with this, spiritually speaking, if you can. Don't just take this idea of someone to be a fact. Really have to look, really question. Family representative. It's me, you've said. Who is this me? Is it a body? Does a body want anything? And can thoughts really want anything? Where is this me, this family representative? Really, really sit with this question. Really look at it. Don't just take this someone. I'm not saying that you are, but this is such a pervasive illusion. For me, it held a lot of sway for a long time, that this me is here in my body, orienting this whole, all of my desires belong to this me. None of them could really bear fruit until I really looked at who it was that actually wanted them. So it's a true desire. You just got to find out who it really is that wants it. Keep looking, keep going deeper, and ask, why do you want it? That will get to the root of, why do you want to have children? Of course, that may seem obvious to the mind, But if you can say, well, if I had a family, I would feel more contented, I would feel more fulfilled, I would feel more, whatever the fill in the blank for you, then look at, that's what I really want first. Can I want those emotional states first? Then it's much more likely that the physical manifestation can occur too. I hope that gives you something to go with. Nishi says, thank you, Helen. Thank you. Jalaja says, thank you, dear Helen. Could you speak about time? I know it's an illusion, but how does it get created and maintained? Why do we believe in it? Thanks and much love. So it's time is coming from the idea that we're someone. So if you could somehow zoom out and look at the whole universe at the same time, and I'm going to use my, the space between my hands as the whole universe, just for help us understand. So if we feel that we are someone somewhere in the universe, this is where I am, this is where I am, this is where I am, then suddenly the whole concept of time, because if you were here and I'm over here, you wanted to travel to me, it would take so much time, or I wanted to come to you. So it seems that there's a real distance between us and time and a certain amount of space between us. All that comes into play when I feel I have a location, I'm here, you're there, something like that. But if instead all of this universe is me, and I'm everywhere, appearing as the whole universe, then the whole idea of time becomes null and void, and distance and change, and even the space, there's no distance to travel when I'm already where I would go. And even if my body were to move through this everywhereness that I am, I'd still be right where, everywhere from the starting point of the journey, I would be everywhere that my body could go already. So there also wouldn't be any sort of before and after with that. Can you get a sense of it? Can you feel, when I feel I'm at one, when I know where I am, I can say I can point to a country on a map and a town and say, this is where I am. But really, all we can say, that's where our body is, isn't it? That's the only place our body is. So if you can look at what would it look like from everywhere, if you were looking from everywhere all at once, and of course you can't have that experience in that particular body that's asking a question, or even in this body that's answering, but you can know with a deep experiential understanding that you're looking from everywhere all at once. So, and that's true if you find that you can't find a separate being. What you do find is the empty silence of being, and it doesn't have any edges. It must go on forever. Then this illusion of time becomes less and less substantial. Even if you take clock time, right now as I'm recording this, it is 5 p.m. here in the UK. It's already midnight in some places, gone past midnight the next day from here. It's, some people are just starting their day. So even in terms of the clock, it's not so real, is it? It's a kind of arbitrary designation based on where we find our particular body on the planet. So the whole change, space, and time are all linked with this idea that I'm someone somewhere, and I have a location. The moment I think I have a location, I can point to where I am, then time becomes a factor. A certain amount of time in a certain body, and the race is on then to get as much out of this lifetime as I can before this body dies, hopefully awakening. But if I'm everywhere, then I'm also the bodies that will never awaken in this lifetime, that have already awakened in this lifetime, haven't even been born yet, were born 1,000 years ago, will be born 10,000 years from now, etc., etc. So it gets a little less concrete then, doesn't it? Have a ponder of that and see where that takes you. I bet you'll find it's something quite a deeper insight. You can't have any time at all until you have a location. So, Sessions says, before meeting Helen, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. After meeting Helen, forgive me, Father, for I've believed my stories. I must say, I'm really starting to enjoy a lot of the jokes that there's little quips you're putting on here. So yeah. So it's not that I've sinned, I'm not a sinner. It's more that I've believed the story that I'm a sinner, that I'm less than I should be, less than wonderful, less than perfect, something like that, right? It's this idea that there's something wrong with me because I'm a separate being. And we keep seeming to believe that and trying to live up to a better standard. We can't ever manage that better standard because there's really nothing wrong with us in the first place. So we really believe in having sinned. But if you look at the root of the word sin, it comes back to ignorance. To sin is to be ignorant of the truth. That's the literal meaning of it. That puts a different spin on it completely, doesn't it? So SK says, hi, Helen. My question is about beliefs. It is my understanding that subconscious beliefs take precedence over conscious beliefs. And one way to know what my subconscious beliefs are is by whatever I'm experiencing. So do I have to believe in your teachings in order to have the same experience you did when you awakened? I am asking this because I've contemplated financial beliefs, especially not being safe and worthy, over 2 months, and I keep experiencing the same thing. Nothing has changed. I have some thoughts that say stop following your teachings, but something inside me won't let me. It's a strong gut feeling. I trust my gut, and I've decided to stay with you. So I am wondering if I have a subconscious belief not to trust spiritual teachings. Would this block me from breaking through these subconscious beliefs? Would it stop me from awakening? I do so love you, appreciate you and your teachings. Thank you, Helen. I love you too, and thank you for your honesty. So there aren't any, let me go through it bit by bit, there aren't any conscious beliefs. The moment you become conscious of a belief, it's no longer a belief. You're only run by something you haven't seen before. The moment you start to see it, it begins to lose its power to hypnotize you immediately. So contemplation brings these root ideas that come from the emotions and to the surface. Then we can contemplate these root ideas. So if you contemplate in a situation and nothing's actually changing in the experience, so here we're talking about financial lack, as I experienced, you probably heard me say. What's probably happening is you haven't got to the core belief. So instead of looking at the situation, have you looked at the emotions? What negative emotions do you feel on a regular basis around this? Do you feel powerless? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel ashamed? What is it that when you can't seem to get past this pattern, when it's still happening, what does that make you feel? Because to me, it wasn't even about the money anymore towards the end, or the lack of that money. It was the fact that it was still going on. And there was this, actually what kept it in place, it was that from fear. And then as I contemplated the I'm not safe, I'm in danger belief, it began to shift. No, it didn't completely leave my life. This not having enough. What was actually holding it in place at the end was shame. I should not have these karmic patterns still. Some idea like that was at the root. I am not who or how I'm supposed to be. At this point in my awakening, I should be free of these karmic patterns. But in actuality, they'll leave as soon as they can. And if they're still here, then it's got something else to show you. So you can sit with this and go, what does this want to show me? If you get really, really quiet and still and look at, you know, something happens and you don't have enough money to deal with it, you get an unexpected bill, and you go back to the spiritual work again, you feel really angry and frustrated that you can't quite seem to get beyond this. What you might find is there's a karmic pattern about the karmic patterns. That was what I had overriding all the others. This kind of sense, I'm trying to say it in a few different ways so you might pick up on it. This should not be happening. I should be beyond this by now. Something like that. So have a look and see, how do you feel about the fact that this karmic pattern is there overall? Like, how do you feel about the fact that it's still there now? Is there some embarrassment, anger, self-blame? What's going on with that? Shame, even apathy. There's just no point in even trying. I'm just going to give up and go away. Something like that. I'm glad you decided to trust the voice inside you, because that is me anyway. That's me inside you. That is you. I am you. And that voice is saying to trust what feels a resonance. And that may not be these teachings. It may be some other, or a combination, maybe something that a friend says to you. But I would look at, step back from the money thing right now and look at how you feel overall that this is still going on. For me, there was just absolute shame that this, you know, if the Buddha had showed up and said, "How are you doing in your awakening?" I'd have been like, "Oh, you know, I've got these karmic patterns that just will not go away, and I'm beyond angry and beyond hope that I can ever get rid of them." You know, something deep down that was kind of felt a certain way about the fact that I wasn't awakened enough, and that was what was actually going on rather than a financial thing. It'd been there all my life. My very first memory was an argument my parents had about money. No fault of theirs, just that was just the background for my whole existence, because they had the same beliefs as I did. So right from the very start, the first thing I can remember is that money is not a good thing. So there was ideas that was going to be harder to shift. This karmic pattern is going to be harder to shift than any other one. So that might also be another thing that's playing out there. So have a look at that. Make sure that you're working from the emotions themselves, negative emotions, looking at the belief, rather than what mind's telling you consciously about money. The thoughts that are going around your head about money, I would put those aside. That's mind trying to explain why it's still not gone yet. Mind doesn't know. So I would work directly from the root emotions that are coming up. You might have to really, you might have got so used to feeling despair or apathy or shame that you don't even notice you're feeling it. So, you know, imagine if the Buddha sat down next to you, showed up and said, "How are you doing right now with this?" And if you could say to him, "You know what, this has just left my life. I'm so glad it's gone, and there's more than enough money coming in. I don't have to worry anymore." And then flip that on its head. If you had to say to him, "This is still going on. Like, what is this about? And I just don't even really feel I can ever get rid of this." Can you feel the disempowerment in that? The powerlessness of the separate being. So there'll be something like that underneath. So have a real good look at that, and let me know, write back in and let me know, and we can go from there. Or you might even just looking at it might begin to shift it. For me, it was a pattern, a way of thinking about the fact I still had karmic patterns, and it was the only thing, the shame, was keeping it in place. I really had to look and say, well, as soon as I can see through this, I will. I'm doing the best I can. If it hasn't gone yet, it's because I haven't seen the belief fully, the thoughts behind it. Not because I'm doing anything wrong. It just hasn't yet moved from unconscious to conscious. So the moment I begin to ask, what is it I'm not seeing? So then there's an opening there. If, like, you might be doing like I was assuming it was still about the money. It was showing up financially, but that really wasn't what it was about. It wasn't. We started with fear and then anger, and then the last bit of it was this shame. So don't know if what I'm saying resonates with you, but if there's intense anger, shame, and a whole lot of sometimes despair, usually just apathy. This is just going to be my life. It's never going to go. Something like that. Can you feel some kind of really low energy in there around? I'm never going to be able to get to the bottom of this karmic pattern. It's just going to be going on forever. Something like that. So have a go with that and see. You can do this. You are doing this. Christina says, Hi Helen, in your video, there's no thinker, just thoughts. You say that thoughts are not mine, that thoughts pop in and out by itself. I have noticed that. But I heard we have free will to think. And I heard that the ego mind is a software program. It can be used for brilliant thoughts, but if not controlled, it will align with low frequency thoughts that are not constructive nor pleasant. Well, we've all experienced that, haven't we? Definitely. So we can use the mind to think. I also attract thoughts and ideas when I focus on something and then stop focusing. Then I get an idea, a thought. Question. I understand that everything that is has always been. It is never created nor destroyed. So when we think, maybe we rather attract a thought with our frequency. That is, it's not mine. I just discovered it. It was already there waiting for someone to align with it, floating around in this sea of consciousness. The question is how to align with high frequency thoughts then. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about my thoughts about thoughts? P.S. The song Heroes, Eurovision winner 2015. Just read the lyrics. I'll have a look at that afterwards. Thank you. What are my thoughts about your thoughts on thoughts? Yeah. So I agree. The only thing I would say different is we attract our overall frequency, our vibration of the mind and the body, the manifestation of me, of the self. Because the unmanifest is not vibrating, the mind and body, it comes into vibration made manifest. We're drawing to similar vibrations rather than the actual thoughts. Our vibration draws another vibration, then that coalesces or condenses into a thought. So there's frequencies floating around in the ether, as you were saying. And we were saying the same thing as what, we're both saying the same thing here. If I'm very fearful, then I'll find a whole lot of fearful thoughts start showing up because they have a place to take root and manifest inside. And I'll have lots of scary, fearful, anxious thoughts, things like that. And again, it's not mine, it's not me, they're just like frequencies. So how do I make sure that I'm changing my thoughts? Well, what's the one thing that lowers the frequency of the body mind more than anything else? What is it that brings the vibration down more than anything else? It's this idea that I'm a separate being. It's so anti-reality, anti what's actually true. And it costs the self so much energy to keep sustaining this illusion all the time that it blocks off the majority of the life force that can flow through the chakra system down into the meridians and then the emotional and physical bodies, all of that. So as we're self-inquiring or as we're contemplating in a question or we just don't know anything at all in that moment, then there's an abundance of life force energy and we'll begin to feel things like peace, joy, contentment, love, eventually bliss. And then we've got to attract thoughts, frequencies to come to us that are similar on that. So it's going to be, it's not my thoughts. They don't belong to anyone. They're not even my frequencies, are they? They're just frequencies. An ocean, the whole of manifestation is an ocean of vibration, and there's various frequencies moving around in that. And yeah, it was just kind of floating around waiting for somewhere to land. And that's why once you have seen that you're not really a separate being, it's quite hard to go back to those old thoughts. You feel very much out of alignment. You're up here, they're down here, and you feel them. It's like, ew, that feels really tight and contracted, and you can kind of get a sense of it. So that's the free will we have, is am I going to create my life from the idea I'm a separate being, or am I going to experience reality? And to do that, that's the recognition. There's no thinker, there's only thoughts, only vibrations. Really, we're saying the same thing. The unmanifest never disappears because it never appears. The vibrations are constantly changing in frequency, but and the thingness, the objectness of them, the actual thought, will come and go. So I feel we're saying the right thing, saying the same thing here. Heroes. I'll have to have a look at. I think I have seen it, but it was yeah. Anyway. Else BSG, I think. Says, hi Helen, I'd love to ask this question. I have a lot of resistance against being social, both in work and with others. My self-esteem gets a drop because I don't feel I have anything to say to them. It makes me feel cold, and I believe that I am unable to love. Actually, had it not been for my poor social skills, it would have been easier. I speak clumsily and I cannot seem to find the words. I tried to put myself out there on several occasions, meaning being social, but my energy level seems to drop totally after a short while after this acting. So I'm beginning to think that what if I'm not meant to be social? It is not so important, but I feel in order to be awakened, you have to be in love. You have to love and to like being near people. I do feel pleasant when I'm alone or among some family. Do you have any advice, please? Thank you. So, well, believe it or not, I used to be a very shy person and spend a lot of time at home on my own. I still do, but because I like my own company, let's say, my with a capital Y. And it's not out of fear or avoidance now, or trying to keep my energy levels up. I experience the exact same thing where I'd be around other beings and I would just feel so utterly drained, and I was acting like like we all do, I suppose, to some degree. As you said, it's exhausting. What if you're not meant to be social? So that's something there, that's a different perspective, isn't it? I like being alone. I do feel pleasant when I'm alone, you've said, or among some family. So for me, the only way this went away totally. So I could be in the middle of a busy airport, train station, in the middle of Satsang with a lot of other beings, a retreat where I'm pretty much around people 24/7 for the whole week, or whether I'm sitting home alone here on my own in deep meditation. I would feel the same. The only thing that ever really fully worked was to question if there are actually other beings to be around. Could I always be alone? Alone because I'm everywhere. Even if this body is surrounded by 100 other bodies, am I going to believe then still that there's 100 beings in that room or in the airport or whatever? And it's such a pervasive belief for me. I had to really look at this, really look. I've come running home for my own solitude and peace, and I would really believe in being alone. I was scared of other people, scared of being alone, scared of being with other beings as well. I had to really question this. Are there actually any other beings than me? Because if there isn't, then I'm alone all the time anyway, in the most beautiful way. I'm everywhere. I am those other beings that I've been trying to avoid. The thing for me that I would question from what you've said here is, can't seem to find the right words, this acting. Why would we be acting a different role? Well, if you look at, why am I putting another face on, a mask on, acting a different role when I go out the door or when I have people over to my home? Why do I heave a huge sigh of relief when they've gone? Because then I can relax and be myself again. Something like that, isn't it? It costs a lot of energy to be someone that you're not. Why would we do that? It's got to be from some idea inside that who I am isn't likable, lovable, as you said. Something inside me is flawed. I've got to be a certain way, a certain type of person, and then they'll like me. And I had a certain way I was being with my friends, a certain way I was being with my children, a certain way I was being with my parents, my sibling, all of it, right? The different role, different hat I was wearing. And I'm sure pretty much everyone does this to some degree. It's exhausting. And part of the awakening process for me was really starting to just let go of that. If I like myself, then they'll like me, or they'll leave my life. They'll move away from my experience. And it was just so nice to be authentically me, whatever that was. There's no framework. This is what Helen looks like. Or you could say, this is what Helen looks like in this moment doing this. Or if I'm grumpy, I'm grumpy. Frustrated, stuck in traffic. So irritated at this thing, or whatever's going on, that's how I am. That's me, authentically me right now. Had to really come to grips with that. I've got to come to like myself. This is how the self thought I should be appearing in this moment. The Numenon, the pure awareness, the sentience before form. This is how it wants to appear right now as me. Who am I to disagree with that? And in that, there's just this dropping of trying to be something other than you are all the time. And people like you anyway, because they can sense on some level that you're not really trying to convince them of anything. You're not trying to get them to like you, approve of you, respect you. You're not asking them to make you feel safe, any of that stuff. It's just, they can just be whatever they are in that moment, right? So you're being you, they're being them. My gut feeling would be to question this. Your self-esteem drops because you don't have anything to say to them. I would say it's the other way around. You don't feel comfortable authentically with them because of low self-esteem. Mind likes to flip it the other way around and make it an impossible problem to solve. Why is your self-esteem low? Because you're listening to thoughts about yourself more than what the sages have said, what you can discover in your self-inquiry. What if everything your mind says about you negatively is absolutely wrong? What if your mind has never met you? What if people that criticize you on the outside, other beings, are reflecting back to you your own self-criticism and judgment? It's got to come in here too. When I come to like myself, I'll accept that I'm doing the best I can at all times. That's all anyone could ever ask of me. Then I begin to like myself more. I have more self-respect then. My self-esteem begins to rise. And then I can be comfortable in any situation. I might still prefer a deep meditation or a satsang to a busy airport, but I won't be suffering when the plane's delayed for 2 hours and everyone's getting grumpy. Even if my body's getting grumpy, I'll be like, well, look, I didn't know it could still do that. That's kind of cute how it's doing that, you know. It's not coming with the same contraction and constriction. So I would look at this, why do you have low self-esteem? And it will be because inside yourself, you're criticizing your own self, judging yourself. And that's reflected back to you from these other beings who aren't really other. They have no choice but to treat you that way if you insist on criticizing yourself first. I really look at that, really, like it's so important. Why am I criticizing myself? Why am I so convinced that my mind knows about me? Why am I convinced that mind, which is just a bunch of thoughts, actually knows me and has a valid opinion when it says that I'm not doing good enough? I had to look at this myself, really. So hope that gives you something to go on. If you see yourself how the Buddha would see the sages, then that's a good question. How would they see me? What would they say about me? And then just learning to trust that more than I learn to, listen to my mind. Somehow, somewhere we've got this idea that the mind knows what it's talking about. And I don't mean to criticize the mind. I'm just saying it cannot see you. It's never met you, your mind. Never. It's talking based on vibrations. What it thinks is true is very different from what's actually true. When we listen to mind, we keep experiencing that in our interactions with others. And then it goes around. I'm even more convinced that my self-esteem takes another battering. And then I try even harder and fail. And it goes around over and over again. So the only way out of that is to question, why are you so convinced that you're not lovable? Whose opinion is most important? your real self's opinion or your mind's. Anything that happens to you externally cannot be counted as good evidence because it's a reflection of what you're saying to yourself inside, a mirror image. So you wouldn't look in the mirror and criticize the reflection. You criticize how your actual body looks, right? Not the reflection. Reflection just shows you what's going on here. So you can look back and go, well, why am I criticizing myself? If you just, for 2 days, make a decision that you're going to be so much nicer to yourself. If you criticize yourself, don't stop there. Add a nice thought on, I'm doing the best I can. I'm always doing the best I can. There isn't really anything wrong with me. I'm getting better every day. Whatever it is that you want to say to yourself that's kinder. You can ask your friends to help you with this. You can ask other spiritual seekers, all of that, and they'll really help you out. So, okay. Blissout says, hello, Helen. In your case, did psychological suffering, such as anxiety, future worries, fears, etc., stop arising? Is there a permanent, complete sense of peace no matter the circumstances? Yes. There's a permanent, complete sense of peace that comes and does not leave ever. In fact, it just gets stronger. It starts off as a lack of suffering, psychological suffering, as you said. Then it deepened into a little bit of contentment. So first time I listened to silence, it felt just plain old boring. It was utterly boring. So much so that I had to really convince myself to try again. There must be missing something important. And when I looked at it, the only reason I kept on listening to silence because I couldn't suffer. When I was listening to silence, I couldn't suffer. I couldn't hold on to any thought. Later, it developed into a contentment. This is okay. Little relaxation, tiny relaxation in the body, and then a little bit of peace. Became more and more. Often I was feeling peace, then it became constant, then it became stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it deepened into love, joy eventually. This is all over the period of like 18 months, 2 years. But from the very first time I listened to silence, I could not suffer. That's the one thing I noticed. So there's a peace that comes and does not go. And I have felt despair. I have felt shame. I have felt terror. I felt real gut level rage. All of those whilst feeling peace. And some of them are feeling blissful too. Because the peace, the bliss is coming from the fact I'm not resisting whatever's going on in my mind. It's not the thoughts themselves, it's whether I'm resisting them. So the way that we resist them is we either identify with them. I'm feeling this, and gosh, you're past that point now. You're starting to realize these aren't anything to do with me. The other way we resist them is go, well, they're not true, so they should just go away. Those are thoughts of a separate being. They should go away. So I'm dividing myself into two, me and the thoughts I'm trying to push away. And it's impossible to feel peace if I feel divided into two. That's what disturbs the peace. Never what is showing up inside me, thoughts, emotions, sensations. So when you really get this, it comes down to a simple thing that ego does, mind, separate sense of self. It's either holding on or pushing away. I want to hold on to the good things, peace, love, and joy. I want to get rid of the thoughts and the fear and the shame and all of that. But you can't do this or this without feeling divided into two. You are the indivisible one that's everywhere. So as soon as you do imaginarily, because you can't actually do it, try to divide yourself, that's when this rupture comes. That's when the frequency of the body drops to some kind of what we call suffering. Suffering, we could say, is really just a lower frequency. Peace, love, and joy and bliss are higher frequencies that come from not feeling divided. That's always and only the root of our suffering. When I got that, I realized peace is always available. And we stop functioning as a someone. We stop holding on to the good and pushing away the bad. If you run towards the bad and make no move to do anything when the good happens, so you're feeling peace and joy, that's fine, but I'm not going to try to hold on to it. some fear comes, or some shame, or some critical thoughts, that's fine, but I'm not going to push them away. You just literally be in that space in which they're showing up. There'll be peace, and it will never leave. It's always in our hands, and it was a critical thing for me to realize, a pivotal point in my own awakening when I really got that. So hope that helps. Daphne says, mind-blowing. Thank you. Thank you. Mind-blowing in the best way. I am says, dear Helen, thank you very much for this wonderful and very useful Ask You Anything section. I would like to ask you about what the difference is between us human beings and animals. If only humans have awareness, do animals participate in creating the phenomena within their consciousness? Can animals be born humans, or humans be born animals? What is your view on eating animals? I am a vegetarian only, with one goal to reduce animal suffering. Thank you very much. It's kind of two questions in one there, so let me just start with the last bit. On my journey to awakening, I was first ate meat, and then I became vegetarian for a while. My body was always struggling with some kind of food intolerance, and I really couldn't figure out what it was. I was having major digestive issues. I won't give you any more detail than that. It went on for years. So vegetarian, then I went vegan. Then I went wheat-free vegan because I was still suffering. Then I went raw food only. And I was still suffering, believe it or not, even just eating raw food. Somehow also I managed to put weight on still, eating raw food only. And my life was just a bit of a disaster. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything, because any human social interaction tends to involve a coffee or a cup of tea, or some kind of, cake or a meal, or we're very social creatures with food. So now I don't categorize anything. I let my body tell me what it wants to eat. I don't want to label myself as anything, because it isn't me anyway, it's my body. And I find that when left alone like that, my body tends to choose foods that are much higher in life force energy. So hope that helps. I never say never about anything. My body has the intelligence to choose, more often than not, things that are full of life force and vitality, and that work with the body. That's not to say I don't enjoy a bit of chocolate every now and again, a glass of wine every now and again. When I go perhaps to eat with my parents, might have a little, glass of wine with the meal every now and again, something like that. It's totally anything in kind of moderation, isn't it, really? So I get asked this question a lot, and I really don't like to say this is what I am, because the moment you label it, I begin to suffer more than whatever. If I ate some food that was very low in life force, the actual labeling of myself using a concept would actually cause more suffering, reflect as more suffering rather than a dodgy diet. So I know that's a different perspective, hopefully. I actually like to, when I've got the time, I can't always do it, I just go to the supermarket store and I just wander around and I just see what feels attractive, as in, energy. Now I'll look at something, I'll pick it up, I'll hold it, and my body gives me some kind of feedback about that. Okay, apparently this is what we're supposed to have today. So can animals, humans don't have awareness. Animals participate in creating the phenomena in their consciousness. If you think of it as only one being, one bright, brilliant white light, that's hard to say. Just imagine for a moment a brilliant white light, and it's shining through these shapes and forms that is created. So in a human being, a sort of different shape of light is able to come through as their individual but not separate consciousness. Same with an animal, a plant, even an amoeba, a rock is having a certain type of experience, a stone, a planet, all of that. So humans are awareness, just as animals are. Everything is awareness. We don't have it. There's a fundamental difference there that's really important to kind of get to grips with as soon as we can. And we can say that the animal's brain is not as evolved as human brains, and so their experience is more simplistic. They might have some very rudimentary desires to run away from something dangerous out of instinct, to run towards something that they can eat, a basic sense of pleasure and pain, all of that. So they're creating in a very basic way, whereas a human being's brain is much more complex. But still the same fundamental mechanism going on. We run away from something that hurts psychologically, emotionally, and physically. Move towards something that feels good. None of us would be in satsang if it didn't come with peace, love, and joy and bliss, right? If the upshot of awakening was more fear, we'd be like, yeah, no, I think I'll stay as a separate being, thanks. So we're still moving towards that which is pleasant. We just are doing it in perhaps the most intelligent way. So there's one being creating its experience through infinite number of forms. There isn't animals and there isn't humans. There's just, you could say, forms and shapes in which the self, the one being, the awareness, is more able to understand itself and experience itself. If you look at a cat, an animal, a frog, it's not really wishing to have a better experience. It's totally content with the experience it's having. It's totally being a frog. It's only human beings with our evolved brains that can wish for a different experience than we're having and reject what's actually here right now. So they don't suffer, animals don't suffer in the same way that we do psychologically. So hope that helps. Go to Gabriel. Hi, Helen. I love you. I love you too. Could you please talk a bit about the difference between the sense of being, which comes from presence, and the vibration of being, which comes from the body? So the sense of being, which comes from the presence, the sense of beingness, same thing to me. The difference is that doesn't have a vibration, does it? If we listen to the silence, rest in the stillness, notice the beingness, the presence, I am here, it doesn't have a vibration attached to it, does it? It is totally unmanifest. It's not actually vibrating at all, not moving. It's completely still and cannot move, cannot make a sound. It's absolutely silent, still, peaceful. So then when we notice that, what happens is more life force is allowed through the body. Because when we're listening to silence or noticing the presence, consciousness, beingness, we're not actually believing any thoughts at all in that moment. There might be thoughts, but we're not believing them. So there's a upsurge of life force energy, which most of us feel as peace. Sometimes it comes as heat. Sometimes we feel it as a vibration. Sometimes we might feel an urge to laugh or yawn or something. The body is translating this extra life force energy. The first way that most of us feel it is vibration. Some people even describe a humming, a buzzing noise that they feel or hear. And for me, the silence wasn't vibrating, isn't, but it seems to be experienced in the body also as a kind of vibration. The effect of the silence on the body, rather than thoughts, is this much higher, faster frequency that can flow through the body then. So it isn't vibrating, but it might be felt as a vibration in the body. When I'm listening to thoughts instead of silence, or when I'm conscious of thoughts rather than conscious of my consciousness, there's going to be much lower frequency flowing through the body, and that'll feel well, we're just very, very used to that. We know what that feels like: discontentment, fear, shame, guilt, apathy, all of the above, anger. So when we stop believing thoughts, then there's just for a moment, and we stop, there's a sense of a much higher energy coming through, and that's what we're calling this vibration. Or we could call it peace. We could call it any names really, but hopefully that helps. Because the silence for me didn't feel like anything, but it had an effect upon the body that was very clear, had an effect upon the mind that was very clear, but it itself, in its unmanifest appearance, doesn't have any vibration. So wonderful. Portia says, "Hi Helen, first of all, thank you for your love. I've been struggling with deeply narcissistic psychopath, sociopath entity, and it's taken me months to write you and share this, and attempt to put it into some coherent context, which I still don't know if I have done. Please bear with me." So you've done well just to send this in. Let's celebrate that, hey? I share a 5-year-old child with a deeply scary narcissist. I refer to him as a dark entity, as this is the only way I can describe it. The so-called energy is too dark and sinister and makes it hard to me at present to put him in the category of being no less than a human being. Sorry. I spent the better part of the proverbial relationship and last nearly 12 years in a gradual walking to awakening, all while unknowingly and sometimes knowingly suffering subtle, insidious abuse from an energy vampire who portrayed himself as a poor, frightened, fragile man-child, which I did not see until I healed my own wounds and became an educated empath versus an unconscious one. This is also how he lured me in when I was still unaware of the dynamics of this pathology. In my journey of awakening and as a ploy to remain in my presence, he portrayed himself as someone who was also interested in self-realization, self-mastery, and cared about important things like inner work, healing, childhood wounds, and the like, though did nothing to address it. He pretended he was abused and hurt by his parents, who he claimed are racist, and cut them out of his life until he needed them again when I left him. Throughout my time with him, all he did was attempt to mirror me as best he could, master. But this was just a predator willing to do whatever it took to remain in the warmth of the energy field he found himself in, mine. His mirroring was frustrating and aggravating and caused a repulsion I couldn't explain. I was vibrant with high energy prior to meeting him, with my life force depleted at a rapid speed. It was like being in a relationship with someone who could only stay alive by me performing CPR on him the entire time. When I left him in my second attempt in 2020, after years of being drained on account of fearing for my young child, I experienced another level of spiritual awakening. However, this was simultaneous to everything going dangerously down for me and my child, everything going up for the narcissist. It's jarred me to experience another level of awakening, yet suffer so badly and watch someone so unconscious experience such massive gains, which I must clarify are designed to and are causing maximum destruction of the quantity of mine and my child's life. It's hard for the mind to understand. My child and myself have nearly died on account of him, and I suffered a sudden and near fatal fall from 3 stories last June on account of him. My child and myself are currently separated by him through his resources and the courts and his unrelenting and destructive need for power and control over our lives, which he has gained through manipulating, exploiting my empathic nature and psychologically and emotionally abusing me in ways that are wholly too excruciating, nothing to do with your typing, it's my dyslexia, to express, but I know you can imagine. As a spiritual being, I'm confused by my circumstances. Everything I've done to attempt to help myself or my child have only helped someone whose sole intent is destruction and causes more damage and trauma. The pain and torture is difficult to bear. I appreciate and understand the importance of this experience as one of the steps in a catalyst to awakening. In the same breath, during this time, I've experienced deeply unconscious beings who believe they are spiritually awake and ascended, excuse and justify deadly abuse behavior as somehow aiding awakening. The need to tie narcissism with spirituality by explaining it as part of the spiritual journey or necessary path in awakening is painful and harmful, and it's not loving and causes more harm than help. Spiritual ascension doesn't have to revolve strictly around pain. Healing doesn't occur when true and real pain is denied. And in the spiritual community, there is a little compassion, validation of that, and more of a need to dismiss abuse by deeply pathological entities by insinuating is a spiritual awakening or integration tool. There is day-to-day living to be done, and whilst enlightenment is taking its form, one does have to navigate daily living where dark entities like narcissists consistently take chunks of life force, aided and abetted by a matrix of unconscious and a desire for denial. And these entities exist and or are causing mass devastation. Do you have any insights to share? Many thanks, Portia. So, my insights about that. Well, I lived with, I had a relationship, not to the extent that you have here that you've talked about, where I came out of it convinced that I was utterly depressed. I have been through depression, absolutely, in the past, for 4 or 5 years. It's really what got me started on this journey. And I ended up with someone who, in my past, had me convinced that I was losing my marbles, shall we say, that I was depressed, I was not seeing things clearly, got me to second guess my own inner wisdom guidance, to override that every single time, my intuition. Got me to the point where I never once listened to my own inner wisdom. I would immediately do what this other person said. And I got to a stage where I didn't trust myself. It was shocking to me that could come because I had had some kind of seeing, not like these days, but it was just in the beginning of seeing. And I had an idea about myself that I was relatively intelligent and educated and aware of what these type of people are like. So it was quite a shock to me because the biggest idea I had was that I would see someone like this coming. And I absolutely didn't. And it was actually a friend who came to see me when I was with this person. And after spending some time with us both, they said to me something I'll never forget. And she said to me that this person has your whole life turned inside out. They have you convinced that you're the one that's depressed when this person has at least 3 different faces that she'd seen in the short time that she'd spent together with us. And it was really utterly shocking because the massive assumption I had was that I would see. If someone was doing that to me, I would know. So in terms of awakening here, there's a whole lot of subjects in what you've written. So I don't really have time to go into all of them, but I'll do my best to address. And, take what I say, digest it. And if there's some sort of more fine-tuned stuff that you want me to speak more about. For me, I began to blame myself, that I put myself in this position. And that was another thing that I learned to do over this time, not trust myself, to blame myself, criticize. I did that anyway, but it was like souped up now. If I was who I thought I was, I would have seen this being coming and I would not have let myself get into that situation. That was the thing that was going on. And actually, after a lot of work, and I ended up having some counseling therapy, wherever you are in the world, I don't know, but here it's, counseling, where I actually, ironically, had to admit that if some kind of narcissist like that is actually good at what they do, even the most intelligent being won't see it coming. And I had to let go of self-blame. I had to let go of judgment about myself. And then as the awakening deepened, I realized that because I had the tendency to judge myself, that was what was making me vulnerable to people like that. So I realized the best, and I don't mean that I caused it, allowed it, or facilitated it. I do not mean that. I have to be clear. It's just that if I'm not criticizing myself, my energy is going to be higher, more peaceful. It's going to be very hard for this kind of being to come into my vicinity and stay for any length of time at all. So this was a romantic relationship, but I've had other people do the same things, systematically set out to attack me. And I'm sure many people have experienced this because of my own self-hatred. And I do mean hatred at the time. Self-esteem was on the floor. I didn't have any self-esteem at this point, I don't think. Had to claw my way back and realize I was always going to be vulnerable to these kind of people until I'd really questioned my own tendency to criticize. So what are the thoughts for you have about this? That you should have seen it coming? You should have got out sooner? You should have dealt with it better, differently? And you've probably been through all this a lot of times, but are you still holding on to those ideas? You did the best you could at the time. And clawing my way back to self-confidence and peace and not actually being terrified of this person took a long time. And then they left my experience as I really began to work on accepting my own self, promising myself that I would never let anyone else's instructions, spiritual or otherwise, override my own guidance ever again. Of course, I did once or twice, but I noticed immediately how that felt. So even if the Buddha showed up next to me and said, you should do this thing, and it didn't feel right, even if Krishna or Muhammad or Christ or whoever turned up, any of the ancient sages or the modern day teachers said something that didn't resonate with me, first I would look and see, is that my own intuitive guidance saying this is not the right thing, or is this resistance? I would ask, is this resistance or guidance? And if it was resistance, then I would take on the advice of that person, that being that was helping me spiritually. Or if it just didn't resonate, I would leave it be. And I decided that I was never going to be in that situation again, because it happened a few times. This was the worst one that I've described. Not like you've been through, but very similar in the way that they systematically set out to destroy your self-esteem, your own guidance system, intuition. Usually they isolate you as well. So I could say a lot more about that. I just want to address the other point, one of the major other points that you brought up. I've met some pretty interesting people along the pathway who have used awakening, the fact that there is no separate being here, to justify having all kinds of negative personality traits. Let's just say that. Whether you call that spiritual bypassing, whatever you call that, I have also met beings who, that there's nobody here to try to work on that. There's nobody here. There's no being here to fix it. It's just anger, something like that. And while that's technically true, as awakening goes deep enough, then it's going to want to express itself every day in more loving and compassionate ways, and less harsh ways. In my experience, beings like that are using their spirituality, whatever level of awakening they've got, to justify holding on to some really not so nice ways of being, then it tends to come back and bite them in the bum anyway, because they keep attracting similar people as what they're willing to hold on to. Most times they're not doing it consciously. They just actually believe what they're saying. They actually believe that they've reached the end point of awakening because they found that there's no separate being and no more work to do, therefore. In fact, the work of releasing these lower frequencies in me, my tendency to criticize other beings, to be angry at other people, myself, shame, and all of that, that actually really begun in earnest once I'd seen there was no separate being. That's not to say I didn't avoid doing that work for a while. I really going to hang out here in the formlessness. That manifestation stuff isn't real. My mind, my body don't exist. My personality, I don't have any relationships. But that was so excruciating. It was relief for about 2 weeks, and then it just became really painful, because the truth was going, yes, but that's only one stage of awakening, and I want to move through this mind and body deeper than that. So most of the people I've met that were doing that weren't realizing they were doing that. A couple of them did, and I just got myself out of the way as soon as I could. Like, you have at that if that's what you want, you know. So it doesn't really one of the biggest challenges along awakening is arrogance. I know this is what awakening is. Safeguard against that is I don't know. Even now, I still don't know. It looks like this right now, right? That's all I can tell you. And if there is no separate being, fine, but there are still tendencies of that separate being. We still keep recreating the idea of that separate being. There's stuff that needs looking at. So I hope that some of what I've said is helpful. And, you know, if you want to write back in with some feedback on that, you're more than welcome. Lina says, "Dear Helen, thank you very much for your beautiful answer. I listened to it many times and I love it. I have another question. What kind of relationship should be between parent and children? I understand that parents have parenting instincts. Is it love? What about children? How do they express or produce love and respect towards their parents? Is it what parents were able to teach their children, or instincts as well? How do you see the whole parent-child picture? Thank you very much. Much love, Lina." Yeah, I think it's love. I think everything is love, which is just another word for awareness. We could call it respect. We could call it good parenting. We could call it awareness. We could call it all of those. I really feel that every relationship, parent and child, and every relationship we could come across is the unfolding of love deepening from a very conditional love to a deeper unconditional love, and then eventually a non-dual love. So seemingly the self that's everywhere splits itself into two beings, seemingly parent and child, and then they use that seeming relationship to work out the places where they're conditionally loving each other. And to a certain extent, parents have a head start with this. We tend to love our children unconditionally anyway. Not all parents, of course, but for me, the parent and child relationship really pushed me to love myself unconditionally. And that was the hardest thing of all, as I'm sure we all know. Instincts, parenting instincts, wouldn't they also be coming from that love? We're a combination of the divine presence of love, the conditioning, the social conditioning our parents gave us that we're passing on to our children, changing that as we pass it on. Some things my parents did I would like to do differently. Some things they did with us, and me and my sister, I'd like to continue and I really value, and I've tried to pass that along to my children. Not making them right or wrong. It's just this was useful and helpful, this not so much. So it's a continuation of the social factors, how we're raised, what we believe, how much we're able to unconditionally love in any moment. I think really that's be the way that I'd like to describe it. Children, they tend to be very good at expressing love anyway, really, until they start believing a lot of thoughts, and their identity as a separate being really gets kind of fixated, doesn't it then? So then it tends to diminish a bit. And we have to come back again, like we're doing in Satsang, to unconditionally loving ourselves first of all. Christina, thank you so much for your time codes, your time stamping again. Really appreciate it. Maryanne says, this is very informative and helpful. Certainly a lot to contemplate. Many, many thanks, and Happy New Year to you. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you. Laurie says, last but not least, thank you, Helen, for your loving support. Wow, what wonderful information. It's comforting and also inspiring to me. I have faith through the dark times. Knowing the vast love and support you have for us brings tears to my eyes. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I can do that because I remember those dark times, and they were dark, quite a lot of them, pits of despair, where it feels hopeless, not just feeling that I can't do this awakening thing, that I'll never do it, right? And some emotion is here again, and it's here again, and it just doesn't seem to want to ever leave. It's very hard in those moments, isn't it, to sometimes have faith in your own self. So I used to sit with pictures of, I probably told you this before, probably told you when we were at retreat together, maybe, I don't know, but I had pictures of all the great teachers that I've revered, contemporary and ancient sages, as not necessarily photographs of those, but drawings, representations, and I'd sit with them in my bedroom, and I'd know that they've done it, so I could. That was the only thought that got me through. Sometimes they've done it, I must be able to find a way. And when something came up inside, it just felt so horrible, I would really look at them and ask them, would you say this about me? Would you feel this is true now? That was like just something to hold on to. Some being can already see what I am more clearly than I can. And they've got faith in me because they can see what I already am. And I'll hold on to that. I'm not going to ignore my own feelings or intuition, but I'll hold on to the fact that many beings have walked this path all the way to the end. So can I. And sometimes that was the only thing that gave me any solace. Whether you call that a prayer, I don't know, but I know that you've been going through some challenging times of late. So, I appreciate you sending this in. It does get easier. And for me, it became more about learning to value what the sages would say about me, or did say about me, if I was open. And not necessarily in words, but would ask for help. I would just open, I'd be desperate, and I'd get this warm feeling that would come over me, like someone was just putting a energetic blanket around me or something. That's not the best phrase, but you can get the sense of it, right? As if I was getting a hug from someone or something when I really needed it. I've lost count. I can't remember. Must have been thousands of times I cried in my own bedroom. I'm not telling you this so you're poor you, but just so you can hopefully see that I've been right where you are, and that's why I can help, because I know how convincing that illusion is, and how many times we need to hear it again and again and again till we finally come out of it. So, wow, you guys are keeping me busy these days. I hope you have enjoyed going through this with me. Thank you for taking the time to send in your questions, and if you have anything you want me to address at the end of February, just stick a comment under here, and I'll get through as many as I can in the time that we have. Managed to get through them all today, which is good. So thank you for being here with me. I hope you have had a wonderful January. If not, I hope your February is even better. I hope you believe in yourself a little bit more today than you did yesterday. And then tomorrow even more, just a little bit more, just a little kinder to yourself. Thank you. I will see you next time. Namaste.